Hi, everybody. In these brief remarks, I want to introduce an author whom we'll be reading this week and next, and that is Annie Dillard. We're reading her book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, or some large selections anyway from that book. We're reading an abridged version of it. I have to say that this author is a special inclusion for me in this course, Nature in American Literature. Annie Dillard is an author whom I've admired for a long time, having read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek some years ago and several of her other books. Certainly, she's an outstanding figure in the space of American nature writing, but I think, as you'll see, her work cuts across genres. Is she writing about nature? Yes, certainly so. But she's writing about a lot of other things too, and weaves her prose together with, or weaves into her prose, themes in philosophy and religion and theology and, well, across the whole spectrum. It's a very rich, you may find at times very dense text, but let's introduce her a bit and move into this space. Here is Annie Dillard. I believe this picture was taken in the 1980s, though she herself probably could correct me, and the cover of a recent edition of her book that we're reading, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Annie Dillard was born in 1945. She is a living author. She is an American writer, of course, and she's known for her narrative prose, also for her poetry. She taught for many years at Wesleyan University right here in Connecticut, and she is now retired, and her website indicates that she is spending time with her family. And that is reflected in the third bullet point I've included here, that in recent decades, she's remained largely out of the spotlight. She's not a personality on social media. She's not tweeting. She's not taking issues on all the main, or taking stands on all the main issues of the day. And also in the past 20 years or so, she's only put out, I think, one or two new books. So her pace of writing, I suppose, or at least of publication, has slowed from what it was in earlier years. That all being said, her work is a body of work that has defined the literary landscape, especially in the 1970s and 80s. And Annie Dillard's books are often included in creative writing programs as examples of the craft. As you read, I hope you're able to appreciate that and see that. She's modeling what narrative prose, what nonfiction writing can be. She wrote the book that we're reading, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, when she was only 28 years old. And I think we can pause to think about that. Maybe from your vantage, 28 does seem advanced in age. From mine, it does not. That's quite a young age, you may agree, to produce a work of such depth and thoughtfulness as she did here with Tinker Creek. It was published in 1974, and it promptly won the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, this was her first book of prose. She had a volume of poetry that came out before this, but it's a remarkable achievement to win the Pulitzer Prize for your very first nonfiction monograph, we'd call it, a book-length text. The book is describing her time living near Tinker Creek, just outside Roanoke, Virginia, and importantly, it's inspired in part by her work on and reading of Henry David Thoreau, someone, of course, we've also spent time with in this course, and who's the only other author in the course to receive 2 weeks of attention. That's because this book, Pilgrim, as we'll call it, and Thoreau's book, Walden, are both such landmarks in the history of American nature writing. Of course, Walden was published in 1854, and Dillard is writing long after that. However, like Thoreau, and she says this explicitly and refers to Thoreau in a few different places, she's writing a meteorological journal of the mind. That's at least how Thoreau put it, and Dillard is seconding that characterization also of her work. Thoreau was the subject of Dillard's, I believe, master's thesis, anyway, a thesis that she wrote soon before writing Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. So he would have been very much on her mind, and I'd be interested to discuss in class what kind of parallels or dissimilarities you sense between Thoreau and Dillard. And as I mentioned at the top, we are reading an abridgment of Dillard's book, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Here is to recall Henry David Thoreau, and we might have fresh in our mind this quotation from Thoreau, displayed near Walden Pond today, the reconstruction of his cabin. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. This notion of living deliberately, I would hazard, is also very important for Dillard, as well as this hope that you might not, when you come to die, discover that you had not lived. What is it to live? What is it to live fully? And to live, as we'll see, is an important theme in the book, with attention and perceptiveness and seeing. On those themes, we can begin with those themes. I want to just point out a few themes, and then what I'm going to do is look through a few passages, mostly from the earlier portion of our selection from the book. But we'll walk through what she's doing in those passages, and hopefully in that way kind of prime the pump for you to interpret some of the other passages that you'll read this week and next. I've identified 5 themes here. I mean, one theme is attention. I've tried to bold some of the key words. The practice of attention and what it means to see. And I've put see in quotation marks. Attention is something when people say pay attention. We can attend to certain things. We can attend class. It's fair to say, I would hazard, though, that attention is a kind of practice. It's something that you can get better at. You can hone your capacity for attention. You can also lose that capacity, as many of us have done in recent years due to the changing technological landscape and social media and our phones and screens. In the book, though, she's really concerned with, and you'll see she devotes many pages to this early on in the selection, what it means to see. Also a discussion of blindness, of people who have gained their sight and struggled with that. I encourage you to devote special attention to those passages, and we'll look at some of them both in a few moments here and also in class. A second theme, the particularity of place, of being where one is. Remember, we recently discussed the work of Wendell Berry, and I would say that this approach in Dillard is very similar to what Berry is talking about. Berry was in San Francisco, he was in New York, he traveled to Europe, he'd been in all these different places. He was living the life of a writer as society understands that role. But where did he really end up making his mark? Where did he find his voice as a writer most fully? In his native Kentucky, right? He moved back and did all the things that we discussed that he did. This focus on the particularity of, for Berry, Kentucky, and for Dillard, Tinker Creek, is important. It's not that there's a center and periphery in terms of our depth of engagement with the world, where I have to be in the center, I have to be in New York, or I have to be in Chicago or LA, and only there can I kind of get that depth of experience and get that richness and fullness. You can get richness and fullness and depth, on your walk across campus. You can get it in a park that you like to visit. You can get it in a backyard or in any kind of area where you are. You can get it in an urban area as well. The important thing is to enter deeply and fully into the place where you are, rather than seeking a place that might seem to be more amenable to that kind of practice. A third theme, nature red in tooth and claw. This is it's an old phrase that's often repeated. We have a little line here from Dillard that I would quote: "Evolution loves death more than it loves you or me." There's no idealization of nature in Annie Dillard. There's no sense that nature is beautiful and pristine and pure and perfect, and civilization is somehow bad and corrupting. Consider the episode, famous one, with the frog who gets stung. Is it stung by the water beetle? And insides of the frog are digested and then drunk by the beetle. That vivid description of the frog's skin sac kind of deflating before her eyes early in the book. That's something we can talk about in class, but it's certainly not a romanticized view of nature. By romantic here, we don't mean having to do with dating relationships. We mean a view that again idealizes or makes what is not man-made seem pure and perfect, or what is old, or what is something about which we might have some sense of nostalgia. Dillard's not doing that. She's very much in the present, and her eyes are I would say, wide open. Change and process in nature. Remember, we pointed out that the quotation placed at the beginning of a text is called the epigraph. So it's something that kind of sets the tone for the text. And here we have an epigraph from Heraclitus, which is the following. It ever was, and is, and shall be, ever living fire, in measures being kindled, and in measures going out. Heraclitus was an ancient Greek philosopher. We call him a pre-Socratic philosopher. Socrates was a kind of inaugurator of the project that we today call philosophy. Heraclitus was among the thinkers that Socrates would have been aware of, along with Thales and other early thinkers, Protagoras. We talk about those in the course Ancient Greek Thought, by the way. For Heraclitus, the whole universe was in a constant state of flux and change, and he used the image of fire to describe this. If you've watched a burning fire or a candle flame even, you see there's a constant movement, constant change. Nothing is just static about it. It's pure dynamism. It's energy. And so it ever was and is and shall be ever living fire. It here is the universe, right? The cosmos, nature itself is in a constant state of change and moving through different processes, in measures being kindled and in measures going out. So what Dillard is counseling us to do is, as we're open our eyes to attend to this constant process of change. And a final point worth mentioning is the use of religious and spiritual religious themes in Dillard, especially in this book. So we have a little line from her on page 82. She's talking about the French philosopher Blaise Pascal, kind of early modern thinker. Every religion, Pascal says, and Dillard quotes, that does not affirm that God is hidden is not true. Every religion that does not affirm that God is hidden. She uses this notion of Deus absconditus. Deus absconditus refers to the hidden God. Why is this important? Dillard is not writing a Christian book, Jewish book, Muslim book. She's not writing in a way, I would say, that is religious in some straightforward sense, right? And she's also not writing a kind of generally spiritual book. She's drawing on my reading, drawing on the literary resources in philosophy, in theology, in literature, in poetry. And she's using images from these sources to convey the depth that she experiences in nature there at Tinker Creek. Deus absconditus is one example of this, right? So, I mean, in the history of Christian thought, especially in theology, I think in Jewish thought as well, there's a notion that what we call God, when we talk about religion, is not, I mean, to put it so, a dude on a cloud, right? A guy or a girl or whomever it is, a being simply out there. Certain thinkers have called this the Yeti theory of God. Yeti being the kind of, hard to find, mysterious creature. And where is the Yeti? Does the Yeti exist or not? Let's argue about it. No. Whatever these traditions mean by God, this notion of the Deus absconditus suggests, is something that is hidden, right? God does not reveal God's self in full. In the Jewish tradition, I think Dillard refers to this when she's talking about the burning bush, the episode with Moses. God is not a being with whom you can talk face to face, sit down for a beer. God is a mystery, right? And she uses this term also to refer to nature and refer to Tinker Creek, an active mystery. So when she's referring to religious things, she's not writing simply as a Christian writer. And in fact, if you look at her website today, she specifies on her CV, her curriculum vitae, or what we call her resume, her religion is, quote, none. Right? She's not affiliated with any particular religious group, but she's so profoundly read in these things and has such a capacity for reference across these traditions that it really enriches her work, again, on my own reading. So let's take a look at a few passages. I think I've got 4 or 5 of them. We're just going to walk through and I'll offer a few comments. The first here is from page 2, from very early on. It refers to this notion I just mentioned of active mystery. The creeks, Tinker and Carvin's, are an active mystery, fresh every minute. Theirs is the mystery of continuous creation and all that providence implies, the uncertainty of vision, the horror of the fixed, the dissolution of the present, the intricacy of beauty, the pressure of fecundity, the elusiveness of the free, and the flawed nature of perfection. We could be here for 15 minutes just talking about all of those all of those phrases. I mean, all of them you'll see together, taken together, are taking things that often seem like they are fixed, right? The fixed itself, the present, beauty, the free, perfection, right? These are things that we feel like, well, they're kind of unchanging. They are what they are. But then she's pairing them with words that suggest that they are changing. They are in flux. Think again of Heraclitus, right? This mystery that she is encountering through nature is an active mystery. It's not something you can pin down and have it, wriggling on the wall, as it were. Observe it, map it out. It's something that is elusive, that is hard to pin down, and which we never really can. Theirs is the mystery of continuous creation. Here she's referring to an old theological idea, creatio continua, continuous creation, literally. So you read the Bible. We're talking about the Jewish or Christian traditions. I mean, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you say, okay, well that happened at a certain point. I don't know, 4,000 years ago, or 14 billion years ago, or whenever it is some kind of beginning. Boom, God creates, right? And what does God do? Does he stay? Does he go? Whatever it is. The notion of creatio continua in the theological tradition refers to the idea that God's creating activity is ongoing, is constant, is continuous, right? So God didn't just create and then peace out. God is creating and is creating and is creating, right? And what we refer to as providence, she says here, all that providence implies, that usually refers to the plan that God has for history, right? That plan itself is unfolding, is changing, is developing, right? So Dillard is taking here these notions that seem always very kind of fixed and solid and introducing into them change and process. This is a longish passage, which I will read out for you, but it refers to an idea I think that's pretty straightforward. The lover can see, and the knowledgeable. So that means the lover can see, and the knowledgeable can see. A person who is knowledgeable can see. An episode. I visited an aunt and uncle at a quarter horse ranch in Cody, Wyoming. I couldn't do much of anything useful, but I thought, draw. So we all sat around the kitchen table after supper. I produced a sheet of paper and drew a horse. That's one lame horse, my aunt volunteered. The rest of the family joined in. Only place to saddle that one is his neck. Looks like we better shoot the poor thing on account of those terrible growths. Right? Okay, so she thought she could draw. Apparently she can't. Meekly, I slid the pencil and paper down the table. Everyone in that family, including my 3 young cousins, could draw a horse beautifully. When the paper came back, it looked as though 5 shining real quarter horses had been corralled by mistake with a paper mache moose. The real horses seemed to gaze at the monster with a steady, puzzled air. What's going on here? She, Dillard, does not know, or in the same way, I would imagine, love these horses, quarter horses, as much as her relatives. Why? Is she a bad person? No, of course not. She just doesn't live with them. She doesn't know them. She hasn't entered into the, if you want, active mystery of these horses, right? A lover can see, and the knowledgeable. So Dillard has in her mind, is a character in this episode, a picture of a horse that's kind of stylized. It's kind of like just something she thought up, right? But her family members who tend to these horses, who raise these horses, who train these horses and feed them and keep them, right? They know the horses, and so they're able to see them in a real way and thus draw them. Continuing this theme of seeing, I think this is something that connects very well with our culture today. Remember, Dillard's writing this in the early 1970s when photography was a much more complex kind of practice. Today we have our phones. She writes, There is another kind of seeing that involves a letting go. When I see this way, I sway, transfixed, and emptied. The difference between the two ways of seeing is the difference between walking with and without a camera. When I walk with a camera, I walk from shot to shot, reading the light on a calibrated meter, as was done at that time. When I walk without a camera, my own shutter opens, and the moment's light prints on my own silver gut. When I see this second way, I am above all an unscrupulous observer. So if I'm walking from shot to shot with a meter, looking for this and that shot, that's one way of seeing, and that's analogous to how she saw the horse, right? When she was trying to draw this quarter horse, very unsuccessfully by her admission here. When you see in this other way, when I walk without a camera, right, my own shutter opens. There's a kind of seeing that's much deeper, more profound, more real, Dillard would say. It's actually a more accurate way of seeing, and you take in quite a bit more unscrupulously. Here we have another biblical reference just a little further on in this discussion of seeing. The secret of seeing is then the pearl of great price. If I thought someone could teach me to find it and keep it, the secret of seeing, forever, I would stagger barefoot across 100 deserts after any lunatic at all. But although the pearl may be found, it may not be sought. The literature of illumination reveals this above all. Although it comes to those who wait for it, it is always, even to the most practiced and adept, a gift and a total surprise. You can't just write a book, How to See, give you 7 clear-cut steps. You follow those steps, anybody can do it. Right? This is like the Deus absconditus, this secret of seeing, this ability to see the horses, right, the way that her family did, or this ability to see as you do without a camera, right, this depth seeing is something that comes as a gift and a total surprise. It comes to us, right? We open ourselves to it, and it comes to us. She uses the image here of the pearl of great price. This is, I said, a biblical image. The story is from Jesus, one of the parables that he tells, or the examples that he gives. There's a person who discovers in a field a pearl buried in the field. And he wants to have that pearl. This pearl is the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. He will do anything for this pearl. And so what he does is sell everything that he owns, take the proceeds, buy the field, and then he can possess this pearl, right? Jesus is using this as an image for what it means to be his disciple, to follow him, right? To live in this kingdom of God. One doesn't kind of go from time to time, or sometimes enjoy reading a few Bible verses on your phone or something, right? There's a whole life commitment. Sell everything you own and give those proceeds, give that attention, give all that you are to this path of being Jesus' disciple, or of living in the kingdom, right? Now the interesting thing about Dillard is, you'll see here, she's referring to this biblical story. She's not talking about Jesus. She's not saying you should be a follower, disciple of Christ, right? She's not making a religious claim. She's using this religious language and this well-known religious image to talk about something that we could call secular, right? She's talking about our experience of nature, our experience of beholding, of encountering nature. So I would suggest then, and as you read, see if you agree, she's not a religious author, although she's using materials from religion to draw our attention to aspects of our experience that might otherwise go unnoticed. Just a couple more here. Passage. The courage of children and beasts is a function of innocence. When we lose our innocence, when we start feeling the weight of the atmosphere and learn that there's death in the pot, we take leave of our senses. Only children can hear the song of the male house mouse. Only children keep their eyes open. The only thing they have got is sense. They have highly developed input systems, admitting all data indiscriminately. Children do. Matt Sperang here, person she refers to, has collected thousands of arrowheads and spearheads. He says that if you really want to find arrowheads, you must walk with a child. A child will pick up everything. This is something we also find across the tradition, literary and philosophical theological tradition, right? Is a celebration of childlikeness. And I emphasize childlike, right? If a person is childish, it would mean that they're undeveloped in some ways that they might expect to be developed by that point in their life, right? So if I'm making fart jokes in my videos, right, you could say, well, that's childish, right? That's a little below where we are as adults, right? At the same time, or rather by contrast, to be childlike means to approach recovery of this indiscriminate admission of the world, of data, this curiosity, this openness, right? You're not stuck in some kind of dogmatic conception of, oh, this is how things are, oh, that's what a horse looks like. It's like, no, you're willing to see, you're able and willing to see that horse as that horse is. This is what Dillard is calling us to. Friends, that's what I have for you on Annie Dillard. I hope that this discussion of these passages was helpful, and I hope especially that as you read this powerful and beautiful text, you're able to experience something of what Dillard is conveying and what she herself experienced at Tinker Creek. I look forward to our discussions of this book.